On 5 News tonight, the row over David Cameron's honours list, why cancer survivors can suffer for years after treatment, and movie memorabilia that could be yours. The former Prime Minister is accused of keeping cronies happy by giving them awards. The new Prime Minister says she won't step in. Labour say that's not good enough.
Most reasonable people would say it's unacceptable to give Mrs Cameron's stylist an OBE and to hand out knighthoods to members of Parliament like confetti.
Plus, more people are surviving cancer than ever before, but there's concern they're not getting enough support.
I couldn't pay my credit cards because I was out of work, phone up the call centres and they immediately just said, well, we'll default you then. No help whatsoever.
And on high alert, police say they're tracking thousands of potential terrorists right now. Also tonight, an historic day for Yorkshire. The famous Dales National Park gets even bigger, but why are some people not happy about it? And from The Dark Knight to Harry Potter to Gremlins, we take a close look at the movie props that are going up for auction. Welcome to 5 News Tonight. I'm Danny Sinha. Advisors, chauffeurs and even his wife's stylist. Just a few of those who were reportedly in line for awards as part of David Cameron's Resignation Honours list. Well, the leaked list has led to claims of cronyism and of rewarding failure, with prominent members of the defeated Remain campaign, some of those expected to be honoured. Well, opposition MPs say the new Prime Minister, Theresa May, should get involved and reform the system, but she's staying out of it. Here's our political editor, Andy Bell.
As he left Downing Street on that blustery afternoon less than 3 weeks ago, David Cameron had something particular he wanted to say.
I want to thank everyone who's given so much support to me personally over these years. The incredible team at Number 10 and my political advisors, some of whom have been with me since the day I stood for my party's leadership 11 years ago.
But now it seems that wasn't enough. According to leaked reports, he wants to reward some of his closest political allies and friends with honours. So George Osborne, now in the wilderness, may be made a Companion of Honour. Philip Hammond and Michael Fallon may be knighted. They're still ministers, but they backed the Remain camp in the referendum out of loyalty to David Cameron. And there could be honours too for aides closer to home, like Isabel Spearman, a stylist advising Samantha Cameron, who may be given the OBE. And Will Straw, a Labour Party member, helped run the Remain campaign. He may get a CBE. The opposition says this is unacceptable and the current Prime Minister should intervene.
If it was down to me, I would abolish Resignation Honours, and I think Theresa May should consider that. But at least if she's not going to abolish it, she should take responsibility. And if she chooses to approve this list, it will be Theresa May that gives Mrs Cameron's stylist an OBE. It will be Mrs May that gives these MPs their knighthoods, and she will be responsible for it.
Under the rules, it's the current Prime Minister who sends the final list to the Queen. But today, a spokesperson for Theresa May said she won't intervene, as that would set a very bad precedent. Desmond Swayne was David Cameron's parliamentary private secretary. He was knighted in the last Queen's birthday honours, and today he's defended his former boss.
A Prime Minister is out of office unexpectedly and has a debt of honour of people that, you know, he's relied on very heavily in important ways, that suddenly he needs to recognise that and say thank you in a particularly tangible way. And I think this is it.
He may have left Downing Street, but it seems some of the last decisions he took here mean he's not going quietly. Andy Bell, 5 News.
Well, let's talk now to Sir Alistair Graham, who's the former chair of the Committee on Standards in Public Life. He joins us from York. Good evening to you. Good evening. What's your reaction then to this list then?
Well, I do think if the list turns out to be as the leaked report show it to be, it is a misuse of the honours system. The scale and range of what seems to be proposed, I think, is unacceptable and does devalue the system.
Well, that's just it. I mean, do political aides really need letters after their name?
Quite. you can understand a Prime Minister who leaving if there are a small group who wouldn't receive honours otherwise and have given outstanding service, then a small number people I think could live with. But the sort of scale of what's been proposed here, 45 I think is the number, is really disproportionate as to what is reasonable for a resigning Prime Minister to award.
Let's talk about party donors as well, because some of those have been given gongs too. And of course, some of those supported the Remain campaign. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that's appalling, that because that really undermines people's feeling of integrity about our political system, that in effect, if you make sufficiently large donations, you have a very good chance of receiving an honour. And I think the Prime Minister could do two things. One, she could invite a cross-party group in Parliament to look at the honour system to see if it's revising. And she herself could say, look, when I stand down as Prime Minister, whenever that is, I won't have a resignations honours list such as David Cameron is proposing, if that leak is correct.
Of course, Theresa May says she's not getting involved, but what's your opinion? Do you think it's time for the system to be overhauled and even go further for it to be scrapped?
Well, I think there is a requirement to try and reward outstanding public and community service, particularly at the grassroots level in our society. So I'm in favour of an honour system, but clearly the one we've got, which is linked to our days when we had an empire, really does need reforming, but it should be done on a consensual cross-party basis. And that's why Theresa May has been saying she wants to be radical and progressive in a number of areas. Well, she could start very quickly by a cross-party group seeking to reform this system.
And if you were to pick one person who actually deserves that knighthood, in your opinion, who would that be?
Well, it's not for me to make a judgment because I haven't worked in Downing Street alongside David Cameron. But most of the people, it seems to me, could have been processed in a normal way, in the normal honour system in January and June, rather than being given this special attention by one person when the Prime Minister resigned. So I'm not picking anybody out. Certainly not the stylist.
Thank you very much, Sir Alistair Graham there. Diagnosis and treatment for those with cancer is so much better than it was in the 70s. That's if you've got it, you're twice as likely to survive for at least a decade than you would have been then. Sadly, though, the disease is complex and so are its outcomes. Many of those who are still alive after tackling it 40 years ago are still dealing with the lifelong side effects. Here's our health correspondent, Catherine Jones.
Being told you have cancer is devastating news to receive. But since the 1970s, research into diagnosis and treatment has made vast progress. Newly developed therapies now offer many a long life after cancer. But surviving the disease does not mean living without its consequences. Over the last 25 years, Helen has fought 6 different cancers. At times, she's become depressed, and it's made it tough for her to hold down a job.
I couldn't pay my credit cards because I was out of work, phone up the call centres and they immediately just say, well, we'll default you then. You then go back and say, excuse me, but I've got cancer, it's not my fault, please don't blacken my credit record. But they don't listen and they just say, as far as they're concerned, you're just making excuses for not paying your bills.
Back in 1971, only 1 in 4 people with cancer survived for 10 years. The most recent figures show that now 1 in 2 will survive that long, and often for many decades more. But a quarter of those patients, an estimated 625,000 people in the UK, live in poor health or with a disability as a result of having had the disease. The government has pledged that by 2020, every cancer patient will get a recovery package tailored to their individual needs. But experts warn the strain on the health service will restrict what's possible.
The resources available to the NHS over the next few years are just enough to keep track of the growth in population. There's no more money on top of that, and that's assuming some absolutely heroic efficiency targets, which I think many in the NHS are very doubtful that are achievable. So quite where new money to pay for cancer comes from is not at all clear to me.
Medical advances have made surviving cancer increasingly common. But living well afterwards remains a challenge for survivors and for those who treat and support them. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
Well, joining me now is Linda Thomas, who's Chief Executive of the charity Macmillan Cancer Support. Good to have you with us this evening, Linda. Let's deal with the huge victory then it is for cancer patients, because there is some good news in this report, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's really great to know that now cancer patients are surviving twice as long as they did in the 1970s. And that's great news, particularly if you are diagnosed with cancer now, because sometimes all we read about in the media is the doom and gloom. The doom and gloom, and of course, presumably those survival rates are improving because of the better treatment as well, and of course, people being diagnosed a lot quickly. Yeah, patients are much more aware of the symptoms, better screening processes in place, and the treatments are better for people. Let's deal with the other list, room for improvement, because there are other lifelong changes that happen to those people who have overcome cancer. Just talk us through some of those. Yeah, so as survival rates improve, then so this changing story of cancer actually does change. And I think that's the difficult thing, really. You know, we want to focus on the great stuff, but actually a lot of people are left with some serious long-term side effects of their cancer, whether that's emotional side effects or whether that's financial side effects or whether that's medical side effects. And that's the interesting thing, because we're not just talking about healthcare things. You mentioned the financial side of things, because presumably they're not working, and they still have bills to pay, etc., etc. I mean, how would you address something like that? Well, I think the first thing that needs to happen is when a cancer patient is diagnosed, it's great if they get the option to have all the information that they need. And that's something that we at Macmillan feel very strongly about, and that's something that we try and help all of our patients do, so that they know what might be ahead of them and some of the things they're going to have to cope with. So immediately people will think, am I going to be alive or dead? But very quickly people will have to start thinking about the financial issues, and that's where organisations like Macmillan come in to really support patients with their finances. I guess in an ideal world, I mean, you looked at that, it's that 360 approach really that we're talking about, isn't it? Absolutely. And that aftercare plan. And in an ideal world, I'm presuming that each cancer patient stroke survivor really should have this tailored programme. But, I mean, is that viable? We've got an NHS that's on its knees. I think it's happening more and more, and it needs to happen more and more in the future. There's 200 different types of cancer. Depending what stage you're diagnosed at, your story will be very different to the person next to you's story. So the more we can personalise care, the better, really. Certainly for the patient, and probably long-term for the NHS as well. Because if you can anticipate problems up front, much better to get them sorted and supported up front. Linda, what's your message to survivors then, if they're listening tonight? Well, I think anybody out there that survived cancer, then that's absolutely brilliant. But what we really want is we want people to be living well beyond cancer. So if anybody is out there struggling and feeling that they can't ask for help, come and ask Macmillan for help, because we can help you. Good news. Thank you very much. A man who attempted to behead a passenger at a tube stop in East London has been jailed for life.
You ain't no Muslim, bruv!
Mohidin Mir was finally subdued by police after attacking people with a knife at Leytonstone Station last December. He claimed to be inspired by so-called Islamic State and was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia at the time of the attack. A man and a woman have been arrested on suspicion of murder after a baby who was seriously injured died in hospital. The 3-month-old boy was admitted to Bristol Children's Hospital on Saturday but died last night. A 20-year-old woman and 26-year-old man are still in custody in connection with the case. A 12-year-old boy is among 4 boys charged with murder after a man was injured outside a McDonald's restaurant in Greater Manchester. The victim, who's been named as Bradley Moore, died later in hospital. The boys appeared before magistrates earlier today and were remanded to appear at Manchester Crown Court at a later date. The public make more than 3,600 contributions to the fight against terrorism every day. That's according to the country's most senior counter-terror officer, who says such cooperation is the UK's greatest advantage in dealing with the issue. Charlotte Grant has more details.
We've already been warned. A terror attack here in Britain is a case of when, not if. Today, the man in charge of policing terror said detectives face a continual threat of potential attacks.
At any one time, we've got several thousand people that we're concerned about to a degree. At the top of that pyramid are the highest risk operations. Those high risk operations are sometimes people who are planning and moving towards attacks.
With a terror attack on UK soil seen as highly likely, police training exercises like this one in a Manchester shopping centre earlier this year are vital. But with the rise in so-called lone wolf attacks, like the one in Nice, where a man drove a lorry into crowds of people, it's getting much more difficult to know when or where an attack might happen. So that's where we come in, with police today praising the contribution of the public and helping to foil potential terrorist attacks. For example, members of the public have called the confidential anti-terrorist hotline an average of 32 times a day. Police say we all need to do our part to prevent another terrorist attack happening. Police say these public contributions to the fight against terrorism can help disrupt attacks.
It may be they've been on our radar and there's a bit of intelligence, or it may be someone in the community or a friend or a relative had half a sign that they were gravitating towards extremism and terrorism. So between us, I think there is no attack which is inevitable.
The relationship between police and public is now more important than ever before. Charlotte Grant, 5 News.
The mother-in-law of Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone has been freed unharmed after being kidnapped in Brazil. The 67-year-old was abducted from her home in Sao Paulo 10 days ago with £28 million demanded for her release. Well, it took a major police operation to set her free. Well, Simon Vigo has been following this story. And Simon, just bring us up to speed.
Well, it's Aparecida Schunk, who's the mother of Fabiana Ecclestone, married to Bernie, the boss of Formula One, the fourth richest man in the UK. This is the dramatic moment she was freed.
Peço para os bandidos não sequestrar ninguém em São Paulo, que eles vão preso.
And she's saying there, I only asked for these bandits to be jailed so they can't abduct anyone else in Sao Paulo. She was unharmed in the operation and indeed during her ordeal. There you can see her hugging another of her daughters. This is the house where she was held for 1 week by 2 men. And as you say, they were demanding a Brazilian record ransom of £28 million, but we understand nothing was paid.
Well, a relief for the family, but just how involved were the Ecclestones as a family in this operation?
Well, behind the scenes, very involved, but they were advised not to go to Brazil. They're in London at the moment. This is Fabiana with Bernie Ecclestone. They've been married for a few years. They wanted to go there, but they were advised it would be counterproductive by the police. They wanted to get private security involved, but actually the police intercepts of the phone calls that the ransom demanders were making actually ended the hostage situation. This is Fabiana with her mother before the drama. Good news is her mother is unhurt. There are hundreds of cases like this in Brazil. Not the sort of publicity they need ahead of the Olympics.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Simon. Coming up on 5 News tonight. Team GB arrive in Rio, but will those games be a success?
We're here to make history. We think we've got the best ever chance. We think we've got the most talented team.
How the Yorkshire Dales just got bigger, but not everyone is pleased. Plus... how you could own a little bit of movie history. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News Tonight. Team GB have finally arrived in Brazil for the 2016 Olympics, which kicks off, of course, this Friday. It's expected the opening ceremony will be an amazing spectacle. But is Rio ready for such a major event? Dominic Reynolds has been finding out.
As the hosts see to the final touches, the team which did all of this 4 years ago has just arrived. And Team GB's leader in Rio is promising big things.
We're here to make history. We think we've got the best ever chance. We think we've got the most talented team that's ever been to an away games. You know, we're 366 strong, and each and every one of those athletes has a very, very good chance of doing something very special out here.
The spectacle starts in 4 days, but Rio's warm-up hasn't been easy. There are the venues, some including the velodrome are said still to be building sites. Yesterday, part of the sailing facility had to be rebuilt after collapsing. In the background is the mosquito-borne Zika virus. That's led some athletes to insist they're staying at home. while many of Russia's athletes have been forced to stay at home. A depleted team arrived after claims of state-sponsored doping. And all of this in an atmosphere of protest in Brazil, against the president and against the Games being staged at all. Not great for this Games then, that yesterday Australian athletes were robbed. Team GB has been told, be careful.
Just, not getting too wrapped up in the environment, just be sensible and just, look after yourself, look after your valuables, and, and that was it, really.
Our athletes have a mountain to climb in Rio if they want to beat London's record medal haul. But this is a place designed to make dreams happen. The opening ceremony is on Friday night. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News.
They're two of the most beautiful national parks in England. But now the Lake District and Yorkshire Dales have got bigger and, according to some, even better. In total, they've been extended by 188 square miles to try to boost their tourism. Well, this is how the two national parks used to look. But now, thanks to the extensions to the east and south of the Lake District and the north and west of the Yorkshire Dales, the boundaries almost touch either side of the M6. Peter Lane has been to meet some of those who live in those affected areas to find out what they make of the changes.
The village of Orton in Cumbria now has something of a new identity. It's become part of the Yorkshire Dales National Park, which has just got 24% bigger. So ramblers here from Lancashire today found themselves walking into territory now labelled, in one sense at least, Yorkshire.
It doesn't matter what name you give to it, a national park by any name, as long as it's looked after, that's fine with me.
For the community here, like the local chocolate makers, life should be about to get sweeter, as being in the park puts you on the tourist trail.
The theory is that when people come, they will stay longer, they will spend more money, which will all help our business to thrive and prosper. I think it's a nice badge to be wearing, isn't it? That you're part of the national park. It's got that kind of kudos, it's got that ring about nice landscapes, good character.
And what a landscape it is. The Yorkshire Dales National Park was designated 60 years ago to protect scenery, wildlife and cultural heritage. Now old administrative boundaries have been revisited and removed, making it even bigger. But that means the park creeps into more of Cumbria and Lancashire.
It's called the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority, but that's just a name. This place used to be called Westmoreland. It's now called Cumbria. So what? What we're talking about is the landscape that's within.
So what's the catch? Well, some warn that getting planning permission could be trickier for residents inside the new, bigger zone.
There will be implications. The national parks are the most protected landscapes in the country, so the main tool for delivering that is the planning system. So clearly there will be more onerous planning conditions placed on businesses and local residents. I look around me and I don't see an imminent threat to our great green land, so I'm still slightly confused as to why we need an extension to the national park.
Both the Yorkshire Dales and Lake District National Parks have been increased in size, so if you haven't visited yet, there's even more reason for a holiday on home shores this summer. Peter Lane, 5 News.
Dramatic footage has emerged of a woman being rescued from her car in torrential floods in Maryland in the United States. Onlookers formed a human chain to reach her car, then carry the woman to safety. 2 people have died and more than 100 have had to be rescued after heavy downpours over the weekend. Now, how would you feel about owning a piece of Harry Potter history or the very suit worn by Christian Bale in The Dark Knight Rises? Well, very soon you could, if you have a few quid to spare. Props from some of the most famous films and television shows are about to go up for auction, with selling prices expected to range from the thousands to the tens of thousands of pounds. Well, before that, you'll get a chance to have a closer look as they're put on display at London's BFI IMAX cinema next month. Well, earlier, Sean Taylor from the prop store brought in some of those most iconic items for us, including the famous Mogwai called Gizmo. The Gizmo puppet, I mean, that is one that really speaks to me. I mean, I guess all these items speak to everybody in their own way, don't they?
Absolutely. Some of these pieces have been around for so long in private collections, and the fact that now they're surfacing, they're going to be in the exhibition at the ADN BFI IMAX. You can come along, you can see it, and just relive part of your childhood.
I want to be clear, though, these are the real McCoy, aren't they?
Absolutely.
They're not copies.
No replicas here. Gizmo really was made in the 80s. This guy was made in the 70s.
Another thing that screams my childhood is the Willy Wonka bars, which we can see over there as well.
Yes, Wonka bars. These are from Johnny Depp.
Right, that isn't my, well, that wasn't quite my era, but yeah, mine
Yep.
was the old one. But
Yep.
similar kind of idea, though, isn't it? I mean, what's going to fetch the most?
The most will be the TIE pilot helmet from Star Wars. He's estimated at £50,000 to £70,000.
Wow. So you need your checkbook for that one, don't you?
Yes, we do payment plans.
I mean, what is it, though, about some of these items that people really adore?
Especially with Star Wars, it's especially of the generation that will probably be bidding, it's part of their childhood. They've grown up, they've seen all of these things, like yourself,
Like me,
Gizmo. It's something tangible that you can have. You can be a bit closer to the films, and just, it's a bit of a show-off as well. You kind of go, this is awesome, look what I've got.
I can see you've got some over there as well, from the Goonies.
Sloth, yes. Hey, you guys.
Some happy memories or scary memories, I might say. From that.
Yes, no, he's good. He's a stunt masks, and he's actually come directly from the stunt guy, Randall Widner. So that is his mask. Probably most famous for the scene where he slides down the sails with a knife on the Inferno.
He's not doing that tonight.
No, he's 30 to 40,000. Again, never seen anything like that before.
Again, a hefty price. I mean, some of these items, we talked about it being from our childhood, that link there. Some of them, though, would appeal to anybody. I'm looking at Batman, the mask over there, or the cowl, is that what it's called?
Yes, yes, boys' toys. Everyone wants to be Batman.
Sian, what's your favourite, then?
Mine has to be the Harry Potter acceptance envelope. I, sadly, as a muggle, didn't get one. But it's one of the hero ones. It's got a wax seal on it.
Wow.
It's what Harry received when he was invited.
And that was to get into Hogwarts, wasn't it?
Yeah, we haven't opened it, so we assume there's a full letter inside. We've looked through the shadows and seen the letter inside. But thankfully, Warner Brothers do a scan of it when they auctioned it off for charity, and it had the full scan of all the like potions books that they needed.
And Jaws, I mean, I've got this on the side here.
Yes,
wow.
Yes, the clapperboard, he's a bit different to all the other ones that you see, because he's obviously got those teeth, little pincer teeth, as opposed to the clapstick that you normally see.
We don't have it in the studio.
And it's featured so heavily in one of the most memorable images of Steven Spielberg on set with the camera. And it was used specifically in the scene, we know, where they shot the final scene. Something that Spielberg had to spend $3,000 of his own money to finance.
And I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's the story behind some of these props as well.
And the fact that you can actually mark up on screen in the photo all of the tiny little scratches and imperfections on it, which is the holy grail of prop collecting.
That was Sian Taylor from the Prop Collection talking to me earlier. Well, just to say, Sian Welby has the weather next. So from all the team, thanks very much for watching. Good night.